Good afternoon. Welcome to this regular council meeting of the Council of the Municipality of Jasper for August 15th, 2023. Welcome to those in attendance in the gallery and those joining us on the Zoom platform. I will call this regular meeting to order. Councillors, you have before you today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Hearing nothing, may I have a motion, please, that council approve the agenda for today's meeting as presented? Councillor Melnick, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have 3 sets of minutes for approval today, beginning with the minutes of the Legislative Committee meeting of July 18th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing nothing, may I have a motion, please, that council approve the minutes of the July 18, 2023 Legislative Committee meeting as presented? Councillor Hall, thank you for that. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have before us as well the minutes of the regular meeting of July 18th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Hearing nothing, seeing nothing. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion? Councillor Keller-Harempy, thank you. That council approved the minutes of the July 18, 2023 regular council meeting as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. And finally, we have before us the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of August 8th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Again, seeing nothing, is there a councillor prepared to make a motion? Councillor Waxer, thank you. That council approved the minutes of the August 8th, 2023 committee of the whole meeting as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried.
Your worship.
Councillor Duana.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the efficiency that you're doing. I just wanted to see if you made note of the change in the meeting time for the next legislative committee meeting. You weren't able to be there at the time, but unfortunately we had to schedule for August 29th. I know that's a fun day.
I have been made aware. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 4. We have no correspondence. Mr. Gray had nothing has arisen since the publication of the agenda. Thank you. That then takes us to agenda item 5, delegations. And we have before us today Aquatera, represented by CEO Vaughn Reed, is it? And I understand an interim vice president, if that's what my notes say, Mr. Renwick.
Yeah. Interim VP operations.
Interim VP operations. Well, welcome, sir. Welcome to you both. And I'm happy to turn it over to you gentlemen for your presentation.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate the time. It's a privilege to be here again for our annual presentation to council on our last year of operation here in Jasper. So again, thank you very much for your time. We really do appreciate the opportunity to speak with council. As Mayor said, my name is Vaughn Bend. I'm the CEO of Aquatera. And with me today is Doug Renwick, who is our interim VP operations. He keeps emphasizing the interim. I don't recognize the interim anymore because he's doing such a great job. So he's accompanied me today to help answer any questions you may have. We prepared a presentation to go through, and I'll just advance to an agenda here. It's relatively short, and then obviously if there's questions along the way or at the end, we'd be more than happy to try to answer your questions. So we just a quick introduction, talk a little bit about Aquatera. kind of benefits and strategy of our company. And we've talked about this last year, so we won't spend a whole lot of time there because I don't want to bore you. I would rather talk about kind of some challenges in the industry, and then particularly Jasper and ourselves, Aquatera. We'll cover off our performance over the last year. We do have some performance metrics that we're tracking, and we'll go over those. Some improvements we've made, and then obviously some questions at the end. But feel free if it makes more sense or is timely, just throw a question at us during the presentation. If that works for you, it works for us. Is that fair?
That's fine.
So first slide, just okay. Looks like we've got a mix up in the slides a bit here, but anyways, I'll talk a little bit about the benefits, and I'm not going to talk. I talked about this last year, and I don't really want to go into a lot of depth on this. If there's questions at the end, I can be glad to answer those questions. I just want to kind of highlight a couple of them, which is really one of our main focuses is trusted operator focus on delivering high quality essential services to the region. So wherever we do operate, we obviously are focusing on making sure, obviously our services are important for public health and safety, and for citizens to know that they're getting a quality service. So wherever we operate, we want to make sure we're a trusted operator, and that's one of our major focuses. So I wanted to just highlight that one. The other thing I think is really important, and what's helped us operate in a number of different jurisdictions and operate quite well, is we have a positive relationship with our regulators, and that's really built on proactive communication and planning. So we do actively reach out to the regulators on a regular basis on all our operations across all the areas we operate in Alberta, and that's to make sure that the regulators know that we're open and we're transparent. And then if they have any questions or concerns, they can reach out to us. And we've built a relationship. We don't want to be in a situation where we have an issue and we don't know who we're dealing with on the other side of the table, and they don't know who they're dealing with us. That tends to end up with poor solutions. And so we're really proud of the relationship that we've developed with Alberta Environment and our other regulators. And that's one of our major focuses. And we obviously bring that to Jasper as well as our other areas. So it's one of our really important points, and one I emphasize on a regular basis. We like to work with our regulators, and we find that we get much better solutions when we do that. We're really focused on the communities where we serve. And we got a brief slide on some of the things we've done in Jasper, and we'd like to do more. But we're really focused on, we're owned by the community, and we really want to focus on the communities where we serve. And we like to give back to the community. We like to make sure our employers are involved. We want to make sure that the community sees us as part of a community, just not another corporation. It's very, very important to us. And our employees really kind of buy into that philosophy. We find we end up getting highly motivated employees that are committed. We're living in a community. They can talk to their neighbors about what they do, the service they provide, and we find that actually helps us keep our employees motivated and build that trusting relationship with the folks that we serve. So it's very, very important for us, and one of the focuses that we put in front of our staff and also with our board of directors as well, and our shareholders. And the last one I just want to talk about is just we really focus on our staff, making sure that we have the best professionals that we can get to do our work for us. And our staff are generally very highly qualified. And we've invested a lot in making sure that we continue to develop our staff. We like to develop internally, and then we also like to go outside into the marketplace and look for some skills that we may not have, or we're in short supply of, and we attract those people as well. So really focusing on people is kind of what we're all about. So I just wanted to I know there's a lot of stuff on this slide. We're proud of the benefits we bring, but I wanted to just highlight those few for the council. And I know I went over a lot of these last year. So, okay. Locations, where are we operating? And so we're continuing to expand our business. We're finding that obviously our main customers are municipalities and the citizens of those municipalities. And what we're finding is generally municipalities tend to do these services themselves in certain cases, in a lot of cases. And what we're finding is there's a lot of challenges. I'll talk a little bit about that municipalities are facing, because you provide a lot of things to a lot of people. And so what we find our advantage is we're focusing specifically on water, wastewater, and solid waste. And so when we do that, we're able to provide solutions to some municipalities that may not be able to either afford it or have the focus for it or be able to hire the staff they need, because like I said, at the end of the day, you have limited resources. And so for us specializing, we're finding that we're finding a lot of customers out there that want to work with us. And being owned by municipalities, we understand the challenges and pressures you're under, right? We understand the challenges municipalities have. And so we speak a lot of the same language, but we have to operate as a competitive business, so that adds some value to who we work for. And I noticed on our map here that we've moved Drumheller to south of the province. So if you look, we have tremendous powers, and we decided to move Drumheller closer to the border, right, to try to attract more American tourists. So actually, that was pointed out by your mayor. And obviously we need a geography lesson too. So
how'd you get the fossils on the flatbed? I don't.
You know what? It was a difficult job, but we managed to get it done. So obviously we have Jasper as a star in our fleet. We love being here, and it provides a lot of exposure for us, and we're very proud to be here, and obviously that's why I was happy to come to this meeting to present to council. So, I think that, we talked earlier about kind of your challenges trying to be everything to everybody. We focus on water, wastewater in particular, and there's a ton of industry challenges that are coming at us. And I'm just gonna highlight a couple of them that have seemed to come to the fore in the last probably year, 18 months, maybe 2 years, is number one is water scarcity and watershed challenges. So, you may be hearing some of the things you're down in the States, kind of in the southern states, Los Angeles, those types of areas where they're running out of water. And that's driving all sorts of issues for municipalities. It's driving all sorts of new environmental regulations. And so one of the things we're seeing is we're trying to get a little bit ahead of it, in that, where we are, generally speaking, we're not challenged, at least in this part of the province, not challenged for water quantity yet. But what we're seeing is there's starting to be noise in the regulated industries around looking at watersheds as a whole, as opposed to particular municipalities and their needs. So there's going to be more and more challenges on providers of water, specifically for domestic use. So what we're trying to do is get ahead of it and figure out, how do we actually work collaboratively with other users within the watershed, right? How do we make sure that we're dealing with industry, we're dealing with domestic, we're dealing with environmental groups, special interest groups, so that we can figure out a way to plan our way into the future, as opposed to be a little more proactive as opposed to reactive. And what we're finding is we're getting a lot more pressure on our operations on how we're using water. Traditionally, municipal water systems have been kind of a once-through type of system, where you pull it out of a source, you use it, and then you treat it and you put it back in that source. And it's essentially a once-through system. And there's a lot more focus on recycling. There's a lot more focus on multi-use facilities. And those are some of the things that we're investigating. We're seeing we're getting a lot more pressure on that. Digital transformation, obviously, there's a lot of talk about AI. And there's lots of ways that it can help you. There's lots of ways that technology can help you, but investing in the wrong place actually can cause you lots of pain. And so we're learning. Sometimes we're at the bleeding edge of technology, but what we're finding is, as we focus specifically on the industry, there's lots of new technologies out there that we think we can use to actually better utilize the resource, better use our people, right? Better use our investments, i.e. our money, to get that better bang for the buck for the customers. So there's a heck of a lot. There's a lot of advancements in that area. Increasing stakeholder pressure. I'm sure that you're in the crucible, I think, probably every day. You have a beautiful community in one of the most beautiful areas in the world. But everybody wants something, and a lot of times they want something different. And that's what we're finding around water is people, there's a lot of stakeholders out there, and they're a lot more vocal on what they want and what they don't want. And we're finding a lot of times they conflict. So we're trying to find common ground to deal with stakeholder issues. And it has a big impact on our operation, big impact on our community. So we're finding we need to invest more and more time and effort and energy and people in that. And so as we add people to do that, then that is a benefit we can take to all the communities that we serve. And that's one of the things we would like to continue to bring to Jasper as well. And then just we just seen it recently. You had you had an event last fall, I believe. The year's gone so fast. We had wildfires. We had wildfires in Grand Prairie region. They're basically on the very edge of the city. We had people losing homes. We had to respond as a water provider. Initially, we were the only ones who were able to provide the firefighters water because they couldn't get to the river. Right, the resources hadn't mobilized to help fight the fires quickly enough. So we were a critical link in providing firefighting water. And then we had to fall into the emergency response plan, very similar to where we worked John and the rest of you last year, and how you folks did such a great job. But extreme weather events are becoming more the norm, and we went from a fire to potential flood, like almost in the same kind of time space. And so we were threatened to lose our water source due to a fire, and then we were threatened to lose our water source due to a flood. And so we're having to figure out how do we provide resistance to our water supply systems in these types of events on an ongoing basis, right? Without expending tremendous amount of resources that overburden the customer. So a big challenge there. And then the other thing that is a challenge that we're finding, a challenge I'm sure you are as well, is access to qualified staff. We're actually now working with the Northwest Polytechnic College to put together in place an operator training program where they'll do the education piece and we'll do the procurement in our facilities. So we're finding we're not able to attract as many people from the market that we'd like. So we're having to do kind of a hybrid solution where we invest more in our young people and bring them up into a trade that actually not a lot of people know about, but is extremely valuable in society. So we're finding that access to qualified staff is a real challenge for us. So next slide is just, where are we together now? So we've been fortunate. We've been here for 24 months, so over 2 years. It's gone by in a blink of an eye, and we've learned a ton, and we really enjoyed being here. On the environmental side, in the last year, we had more contraventions than we'd obviously like. We've had 5 in the last kind of time frame year period contraventions on our operation. We're kind of attributing 4 to the Gentleman wildfire. So 4 of the 5 we think are either directly due to or heavily influenced by that event. So essentially we had about 1 in the last year. We'd like it to be 0, and that's what we continually work for, but essentially that's kind of where we are over the last year. We basically improved our safety performance. I'm just going to skip a couple of these, but we provided support through the period of emergency response and communication over environment. So like I said earlier, we worked with your folks during that event, and we felt like we did a pretty good job. And but like, as I said earlier, we were just a small part of a large team that had a tremendous response. You folks did an amazing job during that event, and we were just proud to be part of it. We've improved our safety performance. Safety performance for us is number 1. Obviously, if people are our number 1 resource, we have to take care of them. And in the last year, we haven't had any safety incidents in this operation. And until I think probably a couple of weeks ago, we were almost a year across all our operations without any reportable injuries. Unfortunately, we had 2 in one day. A couple of weeks ago, we had an individual twist an ankle, get out of a truck, and another one. So it was sad to see that record end, but you can never rest on safety. And I think that our proactive performance on focusing on proactive goals like identifying hazards in the workplace at a time and get rid of them, makes a real big impact on keeping our folks safe, and the employees here have really bought into that process. I'm really proud of what they've been able to do here. And I think we've done a little bit more work on understanding kind of the asset here. And we implemented kind of a centralized maintenance system, CityWorks, and we're finding we're able to use that a little bit more effectively here too, as our folks get up to speed on the technology, and we provide them some support from the Grand Prairie region and some of our more skilled maintenance folks. And then at the end of the day there, at the last one, I just really kind of pleased that we were able to support, with Alberta Environment Protection Enhancement Act renewal. Like, we were really happy to be able to provide support to that and to work with getting that in place. So that's always a big one. Operating licenses can have a big impact on your operation. And it's great when you have good people working on the owner's side to work with. So we're really pleased to be able to support that. Community support, this is one we didn't have in last year. Just like I said earlier, now this is just dollars. There's a lot of sentiment and feeling behind all of this, but this is essentially some of the things that we've supported financially over the last year and a bit. And I'm not going to obviously go into each and every one. One I'm actually pretty proud of is the staff participation in Santa's Anonymous, right? It's one thing to write a check. And actually, for corporations, it's actually fairly easy to do that. Well, not that easy for us, but for other corporations, it is. Essentially, what I really like to see is staff participating in events in the community, right? I think that, money is one thing, but I think staff giving their time is very valuable. And so it's great to see some of our staff get involved in that initiative. And there's some other things here that we've been proud to support. We kind of focus our support in the community around kids, around the environment. Anything that can help make the community better. I know that last one's pretty big, but we really try to focus on kids programs as well. So anyways, thank you for allowing us to help out here and there where we can with the community. Really do appreciate it. Okay, this is the scorecard. At the end, I think that these are the key indicators that are within the contract. And I think that overall we've got most of them in the green. I didn't bring my right glasses here, so I'll have to cheat a little bit, apologize. We've got most of these, we've kind of rated ourselves in some areas, and John, if I've gotten off base on some of these, let me know. We'll change them. But I think overall, I think we've done quite well in the last year. The one thing that I think that just highlight a little bit on the technical side, I think we did have some struggles with some of the maintenance. We weren't at our indicators. We ended up at 0%. Now some of these are binaries, like if you miss it by a few percent, you end up with 0. So on the maintenance side, asset management, we end up at what we consider 80%. So you have to be over 90% on our proactive maintenance, and we're at 80. I think we did struggle a little bit with the UV system. There's a few other things in there that caused us some I guess interruptions to our maintenance, or maybe where we would have preferred to be on the overall performance level. Some of the emergency response obviously creates challenges when you're focusing on an emergency, then you're maybe not doing your routine maintenance as timely as you could. So still some opportunities for us to improve there. I think overall, I think we did quite well, but again, we weren't quite where we needed to be on that indicator. And then I think on the capital budget, I think that we marked ourselves down on the capital budget. I think the UV project was one as far as the budget themselves. I think that we were on budget, so we ended up with the green on that indicator. On the schedule, I think that we missed the schedule a bit. I think we had some challenges with the material supply on the UV project, so that we tended to not hit that schedule. So we marked ourselves down on the execution of that project. And so ergo, that's where we ended up with the yellow on that one. The other ones, I think that we marked ourselves green. I think for the most part, we hit those indicators. So we're pretty pleased overall with the year's performance within the last year, considering there was lots of challenges, which there is every year, but particularly with the emergency response last fall. Must be saving up a ton of questions for me at the end. Getting a little worried. And then just kind of a highlight here on some of the other things that we've done. I'm not going to go over each and every one of them. They have them in front of them. One that we're really proud of is no lost time injuries. I touched on that earlier. Obviously, if your people aren't safe, you know, if we're not keeping our folks safe, then they're obviously not going to do a good job. And I've always believed that you can have if you have a safe business, you're going to have a good productive business. So, you know, and you can have a productive business, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. So what we find is the things that you need to have a safe business are the things you need to have a productive one. So you need to have plans, you have trained people, you have tools. So if we focus on the safety, we tend to get good production. And so this last year, we were very pleased with their performance of our staff here locally. They did a really good job. I think we trained a new local operator to support employee leave and some future support requirements. So we've discovered that we're trying to support the development of local people. And I think we were able to do that. We improved our preventive maintenance through reviews and communication. So I think that's getting better, understanding the equipment, understanding the rules, and I think doing a better job with the resources we have. It can always be better, but I think we're quite pleased with our progress this last year. We did have some challenge with the UV system, mind you. I think we worked our way through that, but anyways, we get those hiccups once in a while. And then what we're really proud of is working with the municipalities through the wildfire emergency response. I know I keep referencing that, but it's kind of a big deal. You know, I think, you know, it's funny how quickly it fades into the memory, but, you know, we're pretty proud of being a part of that. But didn't realize it was going to be a dress rehearsal for Grand Prairie the next year. So, but to be honest, we learned a lot from what you folks did here to help us in Grand Prairie here this past few months. So, again, that's one of the reasons we're trying to grow our business is to learn more, do more. And then I think all our environmental reporting is completed on time, and we help foster positive relations with the regulator through their fire emergency response and the renewal. So I think overall, I think we did a pretty good job. Although I'm probably our biggest fan. So next one on environmental performance. Now this is a bit of a detail of the 5 contraventions, and I did talk about how 4 of them we think are related to the fire. You know, I think there's 3 non-compliances to unauthorized releases, which stemmed to the power failures during the fire. That was in September and October. We had a non-compliance around some of our monitoring data. You know, and I think that was also impacted by the power outage. But that being said, we need to be more proactive. And obviously going forward, we'll improve. And then in June, we had a non-compliance and a total chloroform exceedance. And that was some of the challenges we were having with the UV system. And I think we made some improvements there to make sure that didn't happen again. But again, like I said, we want this number to be 0. We ended up with 5. 4 of the 5 we think are related mostly to the emergency. And then I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you. More than happy to answer any questions. Capital summary. Essentially, we had obviously projects get approved by you to improve the facility, and we execute them. If that's what you choose to do, you can choose to do them yourselves. I think the ones we were involved in, I think, went fairly well. You know, we had a pretty major project in the wastewater dewatering overhaul. So we put in a new centrifuge, polymer system, and sludge pumps. So that was a pretty big investment in that facility and a pretty big complex project. So that one took a lot of our time and obviously a lot of coordination with you folks. So thanks for that. Appreciate it. On the ongoing basis, we still have the UV building and bank replacements we're planning for the spring of 24 on that one. We have had some supply chain issues not only here, but in other areas where the supply chain tends to be backed up in some areas. Third process air blow installation, that'll be done. The engineering studies were done in 22, and you got some grant funding in early 23. So we're going to continue to work on that one. And then on hold right now is the equalizer tank, fairly significant investment. And that'll help, once that goes in, when we get funding, that'll help with the process. It stabilizes the process and to start to optimize the process. You're not getting swings and peaks that throws the plan around. So I think that's a good project, but I think it makes sense to obviously wait for funding on that one. So that's kind of the status of that. I think that's it. I apologize for the Michigan presentation, but any questions?
Firstly, thank you for the presentation. And despite moving Drumheller, very happy to see Jasper properly located with a gold star. So that's all that really matters.
It's funny because that's the one I checked for sure.
Yeah. I might begin with a pair of questions, if I may. It's going to the performance results page. And you've indicated a number of times that the 4 non-compliance issues from last year were associated with the Chetamon wildfire and the lack of power, or at least unplanned power outages. My understanding was that there was a backup generator on site, but there were occasions, at least one occasion, where both the ATCO main power line was down and the generator wasn't working. Has anything been done to prevent that from happening again? That is, work to that backup generator in the event that we are at any time in the future again
In a similar situation. I saw John was on the edge of his seat.
Yes.
So I'll defer to John.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have been discussing on making sure that we get the critical loads put onto the generator. There's an option of relocating the transfer switch. The generator is undersized predominantly due to the inflow we get from the JPL lift stations. So they have 5 sewage lift stations over there, and it comes down underneath the Athabasca River and then back up into our plant. So it acts as an inverted siphon. It causes large swings in demand. So there's going to be an option coming forward in this capital budget. Now that we know what the problems are, I've been able to take a look at the wiring and that. And there's going to be a couple options. One is going to be an upsized generator, and one is going to be including a transfer switch relocation. So that'll be presented and discussed in November.
Thank you for that. Related, potentially at least, the other non-compliance issue appears to have been a chloroform issue in June of this year, and then later on the performance results. I noticed, and you mentioned in your remarks, that the UV project is held up with supply chain issues. Are those related? Would the upgrade of the UV system have prevented the exceeding the chloroform count in June?
It's hard to hindsight's 2020, right? So it's hard to say whether or not it would have. I think that the system itself isn't performing the way we'd like. It's old, and that's why obviously there's an upgrade in place. So I think that what we've done is we've made some interim changes to make it more reliable, more robust. Obviously, a new system probably would have helped for sure. But John's again on the edge of his seat, so I'm not sure if I'm going to have to pay him an honorarium for this or not.
Sure.
Your Worship, with the UV system, when we did the conditional assessment with Aquatera before we hired them as an interim operator, it was found that 72% of the bulbs were non-functioning. in that system. It's a 20-year-old system. We did a lot of work to find existing ballasts in the supply chain, and we replaced a bunch of bulbs. So we got things going, but we could never get the UV bulb rack pretty much over 60% operational. If I'm kind of looking at Vidal to see if my numbers are right, but I think that's probably where we ended up getting is as much as we could. So that's why the capital project was initiated to replace the new UV bulbs. One of the options too coming in with the new UV system is that they're going to be self-cleaning. It's going to be a self-cleaning system. It's going to take a lot less manipulations for the operator, lift them in, clean them off. So we figured this will end up being a much more robust system, less prone to breakdown. There's going to be less handling involved. So that's why we're going with that project.
Thank you for that. Councillors, questions for our presenters? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would like to comment on the relocation of Drumheller because for the longest time, we've been 4 hours away from a major airport, and if there's any way you can get Edmonton 2 hours closer to us, that would be a game changer. But what is also great to see, and I'm glad you put it in your presentation, is the municipal support for local organizations, and you should absolutely be celebrating and you should be committed to that. It is always great to see the partners that we have reinvesting in the community and with our charitable groups and different activities that we have. But to get to a little bit of the meat of things, work on Edmonton for me, that'd be great. We did approve the centrifuge and polymer system, and I understand those are specialty items that had to be built for our system. And I'm glad to see they're commissioned. With a 20-year-old plant and a new, more efficient system, are you anticipating any stresses on the rest of the plant because we've got a much more efficient centrifuge and polymer system now? In other words, should we be anticipating stresses on an older infrastructure now that we've added some really great new infrastructure?
And John, I want to add to it. I would say, in my view, I'd say no, but I think that, like what you're doing is you're adding efficiency within your process. And so it should be easier on your downstream equipment, right? On your clarifiers. So it shouldn't actually make the plant work harder. It should make the plant work better. Is kind of what I would say.
Great, and certainly Director Greathead had commented on the challenges with the inflow that we have from across the river, and the equalization tank project would certainly, I think, help with making the plant more efficient and make things flow easier through the system. But I do appreciate the detail in this presentation, and again, I just want to comment on the support of both the employees and the corporation within our local community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Other questions? Councillor Demoda.
Did have a question, but I'm glad that you brought up the challenges different municipalities. Good to see you again, by the way. This afternoon, earlier this morning, I was installing the weather network app on my TV, and there was this little thing that you can click on the video of the day. And I saw that the city of Port Coquitlam in BC was with other municipalities having this golden lawn contest, and it's to encourage people not to water their lawns because they're facing water shortages out there. But I had a chuckle because I quickly referenced your presentation in my mind today when their main award for the winner at the end of this contest was $150 towards a block party, and I'm like, there's nothing under $150. There's nothing under $250 that your company didn't contribute to the community. So I thought that was quite interesting, and I had a little chuckle. So thanks for your presence in the community, and I think that it was seen by many. Going back, maybe this is through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Greathead, just on the reference that you made to Jasper Park Lodge. And I was just wondering, is the contract with the Jasper Park Lodge a short-term one? Is it expiring soon? And is there an ability to renegotiate their usage with us, or does that get captured in the capital consumption and connection that they have with the municipality?
Your Worship, to answer Councillor DeMo's question, the rates were set in the bylaw, our water bylaw, and so there's a formula that we used to charge them for their usage, and that was based on a capital project that was they had financed. That capital project is now amortized, and we will be approaching and discussing this with Jasper Park Lodge as a partnership. That's something CEO Given and I have been working on for a little while, and some preliminary discussions have gone on.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And the reason I was asking is because of the 3C model, as we call it, was kind of put in place to help equalize payments. And, you know, when you're looking at 3.2 million for an equalization tank, and then maybe right sizing, getting the proper backup generator for the property, if the rest of the community is burdened with, you know, the capacity that, you know, another business is putting on the infrastructure, then, you know, I think that we should be leveling out the playing field a little bit, and hopefully they'll be open to further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Are there any other questions of council for our presenters? Seeing none, I thank you both. You did a thorough job then, minimized the questions, although you had some trepidation about that, but your plan worked. So thank you very much for all of that information. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion to receive the presentation from Aquatera for information? Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any debate? I presume not. All those in favor? That motion is carried. So again, thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate your annual report as always. The work that you do for us in a technical nature, but as Councillor Melnick indicated, thank you very much for your support from the community and different groups within the community. Very much appreciated and very well known. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to council, and thank you to Emma. She's wonderful.
Councillors, that takes us to agenda item 6 and 6.1 in particular, the public hearings. So in the midst of this regular meeting, I will call to order a public hearing with respect to the transition to a municipally controlled corporation for the Jasper Community Housing Corporation. For those in the room, I will briefly just go through the process that you can expect to unfold with respect to this public hearing. It will begin with providing an opportunity for administration to introduce and present the topic. In this case, administration is also the applicant, so they will be tied together. But apart from the introduction, we will hear essentially the presentation from the applicant, following which members of council may ask questions of administration regarding the presentation. When that concludes, I will invite public presentations. My understanding was that as of the deadline for written submissions on Friday, there were no written submissions. I would assume that continues to be the case, but regardless, if you are in the gallery today and wish to present, you will be given that opportunity following the conclusion of the council or part of the administrative presentation. I will invite you to take a seat by a microphone. I think we have advertised that presentations will be limited to 5 minutes, and so I would ask each presenter to limit their comments to that time frame. That is exclusive of any time it may take for questions from councillors. So once we have received any presentation from a public member, councillors will again have an opportunity to ask questions as they wish. When that portion of the hearing is concluded, councillors will have an opportunity to again question administration / applicant with respect to any matters that might have arisen during the public presentations. And at the end of that, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. It is a critical juncture because once we close the hearing, no further information will be adduced. So you will be asked to make your decision on the information available. So if you have questions, ensure that they are asked before we close the public hearing. There are a number of motions that council can then consider. Those motions, as in the ordinary course, are subject to amendment at the discretion of council, but we will deal with the motions arising, debate matters, and hopefully vote and conclude the matter sometime later today with the announcement of the results of that vote. So hopefully that is a clear indication of what is to come over the next while. And so I have called this public meeting to order, and I would invite our CAO, Mr. Gibbon, to introduce and make a presentation of the matter for council. Mr. Gibbon.
Hello, Your Worship, Council. Thanks very much. Apologize for joining you remotely today, and not sure how the Wi-Fi will hold up, but I'm supported in the room by Leanne Pelletier, our Community Housing Coordinator, and online by Jake Dean of Colliers and John McDonald of Brownlee Law. They were both intimately involved in drafting the business plan and the memorandum of understanding and the USA, the shareholders agreement. So I'm really going to provide an administrative background introduction with a little bit of the prehistory, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jake to discuss the business plan and the ins and outs of the proposed corporation. Administration's task really began with Council's strategic plan that identified a great priority on housing. As we all know, there is a significant need in the community. And just over a year ago, in June of 2022, Council gave administration direction to identify corporate structures that would enable the Jasper Community Housing Corporation to assume debt independent of the municipality, while also being able to provide some manner of equity in return for capital contributions. Since that time, we've been working again with Jake and John to develop alternatives, and we returned in January of this year, where we presented the concept of a municipally controlled corporation. And at that time, I believe Council was satisfied that that was an appropriate alternative, and you provided direction to administration to further build out the concept, developing a draft business plan and a draft unanimous shareholders agreement.
Mr. Gibbon, excuse the interruption. I have Councillor Melnick attempting to raise a point of order, I believe.
And more so, either your volume is not turned up or the owl isn't turned up, but you're not coming across as loud as you normally do when you are remotely. So step up to the mic, or if we can turn up the owl, because I think councillors and the public are probably finding that the volume is not high enough here in the council chambers.
Absolutely. So I will do my best to speak up. You can maybe give me a wave or a thumbs up if that's any better. And if it's not, my introduction is almost over, and we'll see if Jake's audio is any better than mine. So council, essentially we did draft those business plans. Council saw them in June of this year. And at that time, council directed administration to initiate the formal public hearing process that's required under the Alberta Municipal Government Act. So we're here today to satisfy those requirements. We have for you a draft business plan and all of the other items that are required under the MGA for council to consider the establishment of a municipally controlled corporation. I'm going to actually turn it over to Jake to provide a presentation about the structure of the corporation and that overview. This will be familiar to council, but it is a requirement under the Act, obviously, in this opportunity here from members of the public. And all of the documentation that you're seeing today was available to the public since that last meeting, and we have met all the formal advertising requirements that are set out in the Municipal Government Act as well. Jake, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the business plan and provide an overview of the proposed corporation before we turn it to John, who can speak a bit to the proposed unanimous shareholders agreement. One thing that I would say, council, for all of you and for members of the public, is that we need to ensure that our focus today is on the essential question of, should the municipality set up a municipally controlled corporation? And while there are some technical requirements around saying yes, and there's quite lengthy motion there for you, that's the essential question. I know that everyone in the community will be eager to get into how will the corporation operate, what will the apartment look like, when can we start to rent? But for today, our question really is it a good idea to set up a municipally controlled corporation? Does this structure meet what council was looking for? And has administration satisfied all the requirements that are set out in the Municipal Government Act? And so I appreciate that we'll all want to start to work down the road to getting to construction, but this is an essential step first. And so please keep your focus on those requirements under the Municipal Government Act. And essentially, is council satisfied that this is the right structure for us to move forward on? Jake, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Just going to share my screen here. Can everybody see that?
I believe all of council can see that. Okay. Thank you. Yes, please proceed.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, as Bill mentioned, today we're going to go over the background and objectives of really our engagement with the municipality of Jasper. Then we'll go over the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation, or the proposed municipal controlled corporation. Following that, we'll go through the economic development, the financials and particulars, and then some next steps, which is really the question and answer period. So Bill went through the background. I'll just add a couple points to it. I mean, obviously, the vacancy rates in Jasper have been an issue for quite some time. You know, the last 20 years, they've been hovering around 0%, which has been a huge problem. So the municipality tried to address this shortage, and it became a strategic priority of council and municipal staff. To do so, they established the Jasper Community Housing Corporation in 2007. Following that, last year, we were engaged to do a governance review of the Jasper Community Housing Corporation to see how they could play a more prominent role in addressing the housing shortage in Jasper, in particularly around affordability. So the process that we've taken to date to establish the business plan for the municipally controlled corporation was we went through a data validation and some interviews to establish the functional requirements of the MCC, which had some input from John McDonald, in some interviews and workshops, as well as a market sounding exercise with the private sector in the local community. From there, we developed the business plan framework, which was a preliminary scan of other municipally controlled corporations in Alberta, as well as we drafted the comprehensive framework for the municipality of Jasper. And then finally, we developed the business plan, which we presented June 27th to the committee. And today we are at the public hearing. So the JMHC, or Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation, really the intent of it is to empower and expand the capabilities of the current not-for-profit JCHC. which will allow the municipality to partner with the private sector, be able to finance and construct new housing developments, as well as be potentially the owner and operator of existing municipal assets. So really, there's not a huge difference between the JMHC and the JCHC in terms of role or responsibility, but it just further enhances their capabilities to deliver housing within Jasper. The JMHC organizational structure, you can see there on the left, the municipality of Jasper is the sole shareholder. From there, there'll be a board of directors that's appointed by council. Last time we presented, there was a elected versus appointed. It may be an election process, but really, as they're the only shareholder, they get appointed by council. And then there's the requirement to meet an appointed officer. And from there, there'll be a suite of contracted services. So the MCC will contract the municipality for the housing coordinator, as well as internal support services such as HR, finance, any accounting, information technology, etc., as well as property management services. And there's been some preliminary discussions around that, whether it be a private entity or the Evergreens Foundation. There's been some conversations, there's no service contracts established to date though. Now, there's a lot of information on this slide. I'll point to a couple that are the key information. So the key financials, you can see on the top rows there are the revenues of the JMHC. So the net revenue of Connaught project. Yes, sorry.
Sorry, we lost audio several minutes back. Well, maybe 1 minute back. It seemed like a long time. If you wouldn't mind, I can't remember now the last word I heard from you before we lost audio, but if you could just backtrack a bit before this slide, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. So should I restart with the organizational structure? Would that be helpful?
Sure, that would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So on the left-hand side is the proposed organizational structure, the municipality being the sole shareholder. The board of directors will be appointed by council, and as well as an appointed officer. And then the JMHC will have to contract services. So from both the municipality as well as potentially the private sector. Municipally contracted services include the housing coordinator position, as well as internal support services such as HR, accounting, finance, information technology, all of that. And then as well as property management services, which there have been some preliminary talks with Evergreen Foundation. They may go with a private sector entity to do so. These services contracts have yet to be established. The key financials. So the main point here is that the JMHC remains cash positive, throughout all years of operations. The line items at the top there are all the revenues to the JMHC. So the net revenue of the proposed Connaught development, net revenues meaning the expenses are included in those items. So they produce a net revenue of $281,000, for instance, in 2026. The revenue of the existing assets, so there's 3 assets currently owned by the municipality of Jasper that are proposed to be transferred to the JMHC, which are 2 residences on Benham Drive, and I can't remember the address of the other one, as well as the Cottage Medical Clinic. And then the next line item, the MOJ contribution to existing assets. So those 3 assets that are to be transferred currently operate subsidized from the municipality themselves. We mentioned in our last presentation to committee that theoretically we could increase the revenue of existing assets and remove the contribution from Jasper. However, that's a policy choice by council to subsidize the rent and operations of those 3 assets. And then finally, there's a compliance deposit refund, which is a requirement of Parks Canada. And the compliance deposit is basically paid at the start of construction or prior to construction. And Parks Canada then provides the opportunity to return it with interest. And the interest assumed in this case was 3%. The following line items are the expenditures of the JMHC. So the operational expenditures associated with the 3 assets that are currently owned by the municipality, the repayment of interest and principal on the loan, the $5 million loan to capitalize the Connaught project, and the repayment of the line of credit used to pay that compliance deposit initially. The bottom line, the annual cash flow in the first 5 years, 6 years is negative. However, the cash balance is more important, as the JMHC will maintain a positive cash balance throughout all years of operations. We did do this forecast out to 2064, and from 2064, from 2031 and onwards, the JMHC continues to be cash flow positive and cash positive. Now on to the Connaught development. So the proposed Connaught project, the governance structure shown in front of you. So the basically the JMHC, along with private shareholders, will invest to build the Connaught Project Corporation. The municipality of Jasper recently applied for the AHPP grant and received it a couple of months ago, I believe that was announced. So the JMHC, along with the private sector, will fund the remaining portion of the capital costs associated with the Connaught development. The governance structure shows that the JMHC has all voting shares within the Connaught Project Corp, meaning that they maintain control over the operating and capital elements of the Connaught Project Corporation. There's efficiencies in resource and knowledge management across all shared services due to this, as it'll be the transfer from the JCHC potentially to the JMHC, meaning that that knowledge is transferred since 2007 and previously to that. And the private shareholders will have the non-voting shares. Now, how it'll work is you will subscribe to a share, and then that shareholder will enter into a residential lease with the Connaught Project Corporation. From there, if it's a private sector entity, as in a business, they can sublet it to their employee. They may rent it themselves. They may just be a resident of Jasper who wants to purchase a share. And then in that case, there would only be the residential lease with the Connaught Project Corporation. But what this structure also allows is to replicate it for future developments within Jasper. And there's a figure on the next slide that'll show that. So the private investors, they subscribe to the share. No shareholders actually have ownership or interest in the Connaught Project Corporation, and you're not allowed to condominiumize any of the units. So this next slide shows how you can replicate this structure for a future development. You can see on the right, there's the JMHC. The governance structure one is the initial governance explained for the JMHC, the board of directors, the appointed officer, and the contracted services. To the right is the MOJ existing assets that are to be transferred to the JMHC, and then the Connaught Project Corporation and the private shareholders in that relationship. And then there could be a future development corporation in the future, should this model prove to be effective for the municipality. So the Connaught Project Corporation, it's a proposed 40-unit development with 10 of those units earmarked for the municipality of Jasper. The remaining 30 will be sold to the private market through a share sale. If you look at the two Class A and Class B shares are solely for the JMHC, as they are voting shares. They're 1 and 2 bedroom shares. You can see the difference in price there. $461,000 for the Class A and $539,000 for the Class B. The voting shares allow you to review and revise the corporate structure of the JMHC, as well as the criteria for the board elections or appointments. And finally, you can restructure either of those at any given time with the voting shares, should you choose to do so, of the Connaught Project Corporation. The private shares, on the other hand, have Class D and Class E shares. Those are also 1 and 2 bedroom shares at $304,000 and $354,000. What the shares provide you is access to a unit within the Connaught development, not ownership of the unit itself. As mentioned, the municipality of Jasper received the grant from AHPP, which was great. There are certain requirements under the AHPP that the municipality must meet. Part of that is around rental rates. So the AHPP defines 3 rental bands, really. There's the minimum rent, the mid-range, and market rental. So market, self-explanatory, the current market price of rentals within Jasper. The mid-range is anywhere between 60 and 90% of market rent. And finally, the minimum rent is 60% of market rental rates. Now, both the minimum rent and mid-range rent are defined as affordable under the HPP guidelines, which means that the municipality will meet the requirements. And the entire Connaught Project Corporation will be affordable housing. Okay, so this shows a breakdown of really the capital costs associated with the Connaught Project Corporation, roughly 23.6 million in total. The lands are around $2 million, and we're hoping for a contribution from Parks Canada to subsidize that cost. Then following that, design services, construction services, and project support services total about $21 million there, and that includes a contingency of 15%, which is why there's no contingency included in the contingency line item. Finally, there's the building permit fee and compliance deposit required by Parks Canada to construct the development. So with the contribution, the AHPP grant, and the $5 million debenture, which has been committed by the municipality, the remaining portion is about 6 to 7 million for the private sector to fund, which is how we calculated those share prices shown on an earlier slide. The cash flows. So as you can see, we assume construction is going to happen in 2024 and 2025. The front end there is for that land purchase, design services, and purchase of equipment and materials. And the remaining of the capital costs will be spent in 2025, with the operations of the Connaught development beginning in 2026. The total revenues associated even with affordable housing or affordable rental rates, is 471,000, and the total operations and maintenance costs, which include property management costs, insurance, with capital reserve, and some additional line items, total roughly 190,000, which means that the Connaught development is profitable in year 1 of operations with $281,000, and it continues to escalate from there. We escalated the rental rates just based on historical data provided by the government of Alberta. Any revenues that you see here will be repatriated to the JMHC annually. So there's a trade-off there between the requirement of the private sector. They basically are very hands-off. They purchase the share in the unit. They can lease it to their employees if they like, or live there themselves. And they don't have to do anything. They don't need to change light bulbs, shovel snow, anything like that. All that will be taken care of by the JMHC. So I will turn it back to Bill quickly.
Thanks, Jake. And so maybe just an opportunity, we'll pause here if council has any questions on the business plan or the financials before we go over to John McDonnell from Brownlee, who can discuss the USA and the requirements under the Municipal Government Act. So are there any questions for Jake on the proposed business plan or financials?
Councillors, questions? I see, no, sorry, I see nothing, Mr. Given. So if John wants to proceed.
Right. So maybe, John, if you can give a bit of an overview of the requirements of the MGA, how the documentation in front of council meets those requirements, and a bit of an overview of the proposed unanimous shareholders agreement.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Thank you all for having me here today. I appreciate this. That's too bad this wasn't a day before. I was actually in Jasper over the weekend, but I had to be back in town yesterday evening. So It just one day earlier I would have been present in person with you folks. So in any event, yes, what we're presenting right now is that this is a public hearing required to determine the acceptance of the MCC by the municipality to proceed with creating the MCC, which is the JMHC. The Municipal Government Act restricts and regulates how municipalities can incorporate a corporation under the Business Corporations Act, which is what the entity is proposed to be. There are certain steps that need to be taken. One of the steps is the approval of a business plan, and also the consideration of and entering into a unanimous shareholder agreement. Now, this is prescribed in both the Municipal Government Act and its regulation, the Municipally Controlled Corporation Regulation, that requires a unanimous shareholder agreement. The unanimous shareholder agreement is a constitutional governance document that's going to contractually regulate the interactions between the parties. And in the instance of the JMHC, it's going to regulate how JMHC is going to be controlled and operated by the municipality of Jasper as its shareholder. So there are a number of things that have to be put in place with respect to this corporation, and to comply with the Municipal Government Act. There are 4 primary items that we have to address in this proposed unanimous shareholder agreement, which is the document that is before you in your package. And that actually is on, I believe, page 80 of your agenda package, 80, so I'm clear on that. In section 5.01 at the bottom of that documentation there. You have that the regulation requires that the unanimous shareholder agreement addresses 4 primary points. Now, if you're going to create a utility corporation, there's additional points there, but those are not applicable for your instance. So we're just going to deal with the 4 main points here. Firstly, it's going to address section 146 sub 1 of the Act. If you see that Act, that's not a reference to the Municipal Government Act. That's rather a reference to the Business Corporations Act. And that really dictates what sort of control that the shareholder is going to have control over the entity. And the way you have control over the entity is that we are going to restrict the rights of the corporation to do certain things without going back to its shareholder for approval. Again, the shareholder is the municipality of Jasper. So in other words, this is what the JMHC may do without getting council approval. And primarily, those are the items that are going to be referenced in Article 3, which starts on 78 of the, I should actually probably just share my screen so we can see that. Just bear with me if you don't mind. You have it there, I believe now.
Right up here, you want to see the screen.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Do you have that?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. So this is section 3.01, and these are the items where the corporation cannot do anything without getting approval from the shareholder, and that's namely council. So operationally is that the corporation cannot sell all its assets. In other words, they cannot sell the building without actually getting consent of council. It may not continue as a body corporate in another jurisdiction. So in other words, it cannot become a BC corporation without, or Saskatchewan corporation or whatever, without getting council approval. It cannot do anything else other than the business, and the business is the purpose of operating this entity. So if it states, we're going to actually we're going to convert this to be a affordable housing project, or a housing ownership, and also going to be, say, a water utility. It cannot do that second step of the water utility without getting council approval. Corporate matters there, it cannot amalgamate or merge with any other corporation without council approval. It cannot issue any shares to anyone else without council approval. So if they want to take on a third-party partner, it cannot do that without your consent. And all these kind of attend to, those are further legal elements that go to that same principle. The corporation cannot give financial assistance to any person. It cannot make an assignment for the benefit of creditors. So in other words, to satisfy an outstanding debt, here's a portion of the shares, here's a portion of the units to exchange for that debt. It cannot do that without council approval. It cannot voluntarily go bankrupt without council approval. It cannot grant any mortgages or any sort of security interest without council approval. And then it cannot dissolve itself without council approval, cannot, continue to another jurisdiction without council approval, or enter any partnerships without council approval. So if you go and you appoint a board of directors that are not councillors, which is fine and good, but they still want to make sure you have ultimate council approval over the global part, the global overview of the corporation. This section 3.01 addresses all of that. Now I'm going to go back again to this, what's required under the Municipal Government Act. The Municipal Government Act requires that you have to set forth in the unanimous shareholder agreement its service delivery standards. Simply, the service that's going to be provided is housing, so we're going to leave that within the discretion of the board. And that's going to be, determined for certain things. How often are you going to do window cleaning? How often are, the vacuum, you're going to vacuum the hallways, and the common area is going to be done? How often, or where's garbage pickup going to be? So those are service delivery standards with respect to this corporation. We're not going to prescribe this in the document because we're not going to make it too restrictive. We're going to leave it within discretion of the board. The Municipal Government Act does state that you have to have a dispute resolution process and the unanimous shareholder agreement. And that's amongst the different shareholders. Now, in your instance, there's only one shareholder, being the municipality of Jasper, so that's not applicable. We do not need to include this in the document as well. Now, the material changes to the corporation. If any material change is going to be implemented, there is a procedure that has to be put in place with respect to how your material change is going to be done. And this is a public transparency requirement, so the members of the public are aware of what's going on with this corporate entity. And the public, the material change, I should say, is set forth in this clause here. So it's a material change is defined in the municipally controlled corporations regulation. And really what it does is it addresses these items here, A, B, C, D. So material change is a change in the type of service that's, of the that's going to be provided by the corporation. So again, if it's, right now it's envisioned to be the provision of affordable of housing services, some affordable and some non-affordable for the community. Now, if you're going to change that type of services to, say, again, you become a water utility or a public transit entity or something of the sorts, that's a material change, and the material change will be addressed down below. If you're going to issue or purchase any shares that are going to change the controlling interest of the municipality, of the entity, that will, that's going to dilute municipality of Jasper's control. That's something that the public needs to be made aware of. If you're going to change a geographic location where the corporation is going to provide its services, and that's not already envisioned. So say you're going to, start providing these services in, say, Valemont, just across the border, for instance. That's something that's a material change that has to go back to the public as well. Or if you're going to any sort of other change that a reasonable person would determine is something material, that is something that, again, has to go back to the public. So when this is done, if a material change is being proposed, then the municipality must notify the residents of the proposed material changes to explain the type of services or the name of any new shareholder or any market impact analysis or anything of the sorts that must be done. This information must be made available to the public not less than 30 days prior to the engagement process, and the municipality residents must be provided the opportunity to make representations as to the material change. Now, once it's done, the municipality will then report back to the JMHC of the results of the representations made to the municipality from its engagement concerning the proposed material change. And then they will then deliberate on whether this material change is worthwhile, given what the public has stated. So again, this is a public engagement process to make sure that there's transparency and that your residents and citizens know what's going on with respect to this entity. Okay, so that's those are some of the powerful things with respect to this unanimous shareholder agreement that is in place there. So this document is statutory compliant with what needs to be done with respect to creating a municipal control corporation like the JMHC. And that is in essence really what I wish to discuss concerning this particular document. Let's go stop my share here. Yes, thank you. Right now, the corporation, just so we're clear, is not yet created. We cannot create it yet because we need to have this public hearing done, and we need to have the results of the resolution that's proposed to be passed by council. Once that resolution is passed, if it is passed, I'm not going to be presumptuous on that. If it is passed, then the terms of the resolution will then direct administration to work with the appropriate people to actually create the corporation and bring it to fruition. With that being said, does anyone have any questions with respect to what I presented here?
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Questions from councillors? Well, in the absence of other questions, I'm afraid that I have some. And Mr. Gibbon might want to be part of this. So I'll try and be sort of as general as I can be, but there are some specifics here that concern me. Firstly, the opening comments from administration suggest that existing assets, the 2 rental houses and the clinic, they are going to be transferred to the Municipal Housing Corporation, the MCC. The unanimous shareholders agreement in section C sub B talks about the corporation managing those assets and not owning them. And in the definitions, JCHC assets means those assets owned by the municipality, formerly managed by the JCHC. So I'm looking for some clarity about whether the JMHC is managing those properties or is going to own and manage those properties. Regardless of the outcome of that, my concern is that the unanimous shareholders agreement is very narrow and restricted, and the business of the MCC is restricted to the Connaught project. And yet my understanding is that the MCC that we think we might create is to be a vessel that will do a number of things. This Connaught project is the most significant, but even as it operates that and builds it, it is going to have to manage and perhaps own those other assets, and down the road, hopefully, there will be new ones. So if you look at the definition of business, it is restricted to the Connaught project. And if we go to the section that Mr. McDonald referred us to, 3.01A3, without a special resolution, the MCC cannot carry on any business other than the defined business. And the only defined business is the Connaught project. So I'm just concerned that the intent of the unanimous shareholders agreement is to help construct the vessel that can carry multiple loads. But right now, it can only carry one load. And so I would look for either an opportunity to look at some of these specific wording. Again, the definition of a housing unit is a self-contained unit within one project. So it would exclude housing units and other projects. I'm sure that's not the intent, but my suggestion is, or at least a proposal, could we amend the resolution to reference a unanimous shareholders agreement in form but not in content, and work to make the shareholders agreement more reflective of the outcomes we actually want down the road? So I'm sure it's a very convoluted set of questions, but overall, I just see the proposed unanimous shareholders agreement as too narrow for our rather broad purposes to enhance opportunities for housing development and management in the community.
Your Worship, I'm going to provide a bit of an answer, then I'm going to turn to John to provide the actual legal technical answer. But first, I want to say that as administration, we understand that first things first, we have one project underway, and this is a flexible corporate structure that would allow it to expand to other projects if future councils approved by providing that special resolution. So this is a balance to ensure that the public and council can feel confident that this corporate entity will only be used for the purposes that it was established for, and that won't have mission creep or scope creep. And so every opportunity to advance an additional project or a different project would need a special resolution of council. So, I think that need to have the public informed and direct and formal council approval before starting something new is a feature that is intended. I appreciate what you're saying about the ownership of the existing MOJ staff accommodation properties. I don't know if John, you may want to comment on that specifically, or any of the other matters the mayor raised, but there is that balance of ensuring that there is formal control by the municipality, and the municipality can expand the operations of the corporation, but it would have to be a conscious decision made in public by virtue of a special shareholders resolution. John, do you want to comment about whether there's a need to incorporate a reference to the existing municipally owned assets that are intended to be transferred into the corporation?
Yes, thanks. First of all, I will echo what you said, Bill, concerning the special resolution and future projects. Before I answer that first question you just put to me, that's exactly right. The document doesn't state that the municipality or the corporation shall never do any other type of projects, such as taking on a new development, such sorts. It's just that it cannot do that without going back to council and getting a special resolution approval first, and then that would constitute the material change. So we're not stating that this is a 100% prohibition. Rather, it's a safeguard that it cannot be done without getting the council approval via the special resolution, which also would constitute the material change, and then there's just a public engagement process. Once the process is done, the public engagement process is done, and then once council has approved, then the new project can proceed. Now, with respect to the operation of the existing assets, I will go through that just to make sure we get the wording of that correctly. And forgive me if that doesn't quite reflect the reality. So can I just take that offline, and if it requires another, slight tweaking to the wording, we can do that as well. Because I believe that the resolution that's being proposed gives administration the flexibility to deal with those final elements, because this document is still in draft form. There's still a couple blanks that still need to be completed, such as the legal description of the lands and what have you. So in essence, we're just going to just tinker with the last little wording. It'll go to administration, and then Mr. Given will present it to council for execution thereafter.
And Your Worship, I'll just speak to that final point that John made. You'll note that in the recommendations in your package, it is that council approve and enter into a unanimous shareholders agreement with the MCC. It doesn't say that council approve this unanimous shareholders agreement, that, that allowing for those administrative adjustments, like the description of the lands, and if there are any other minor inconsistencies. So we have that flexibility. If council is comfortable with the ongoing public control that is described in the unanimous shareholders agreement.
I appreciate the thorough answers and consistent answers from both of you, although my concern was that item 3 in the proposed motion says that council approves in form and in content the attached unanimous shareholders agreement. And so I would be, as I indicated, prepared to say in form, but not necessarily in content, because I think some content ought to be changed. And if that happens downstream, I'm fine with that. I just don't want to approve in advance something that has content
Your worship,
that I might quarrel with. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, perhaps just to satisfy that, if and when council moves on to the motions arising, perhaps a rewording there would be to replace in form and in content with consistent with, because really what we're talking about is the USA that ultimately council would be asked to support, consistent with what was described here in the public forum. And appreciating what you say, that the exact content may be slightly different, but it needs to be consistent with the principles that are presented here.
Thank you. Questions from other councillors? Councillor Demota.
It's up to you, just to clarify that, your worship, because I was going to ask for clarification on that. And as far as the recommendations for motions go, is it necessary to include as attached if it's not going to be as attached?
When we get to debate the motion, we can debate those words.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Are there any further questions relating to the presentation from administration/applicant? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question I do have is that in previous presentations to council, Class A and Class B voting shares had an initial value, and I refer to page 30 of our agenda, that those initial values are not there for the purpose of this presentation, and I'd like to have clarity as to how those initial values will be established.
I can answer that. So the share values were established as part of this exercise, keeping in mind that this is more of a Class D estimate on construction costs. Should council motion to continue with the JMHC in the Economic Development Corporation, as well as the development itself, once we have updated capital cost estimates on the construction costs, we'll be able to establish more accurate share pricing, which will then be updated. We can update it in the business plan if required, or this will also be socialized with the public shareholders and private shareholders by the board of directors once established. So the presentation I shared today had share prices for the Class A and Class B, as well as the Class D and E.
If I may, in your presentation, I didn't see those values. You said there were initial values for Class A and Class B?
A, B, D, and E, yes. I can share my screen if you'd like.
Actually, for the purposes of council and because of the screen in the distance, if you could give me the value of the Class A and Class B shares that you have, the initial value, that would be of assistance because, as I say, it wasn't in the documents that were sent to council to review prior to this meeting.
Yes, the Class A shares are estimated at $461,262. And the Class B shares are $538,738. And the Class D and E shares are accurate as listed on page 30.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Do I have that right?
I didn't catch that.
Councillor Devoted, did I see your hand a second ago?
Oh, yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you for bringing up those specifics on the terms on business and in the housing unit. And I appreciate the fact that there's that safety lock in there to bring it to public consultation. And I think it shows that it's a really solid process. And I was grateful for the answers that were given for that. And that was already preconceived. Thank you.
If there are no further questions from councillors or administration, I intend to move to presentations from members of the public. And remembering as councillors that if something is raised in a public presentation, which requires a question to be asked of administration or the other presenters, we will come back to that. So with that, again, there were no registered presenters from the public for today's session, but there are people here in the gallery, and if any are interested in presenting, I will invite you up to one of the microphones on the table and ask that you state your name for the record. You will appear in the minutes of these proceedings, and you will have 5 minutes to make whatever presentation you wish, and then be potentially subjected to whatever questions councillors may have for you. So is there anyone in the gallery who wishes to make a presentation with respect to this public hearing?
No problem. Well, talking about last night. Good afternoon, Council, Mr. Mayor. My name is John Gamblin. I'm not really representing anybody at this time, but I am the president of Mountain Parks Co-op. As I say, I'm not representing them at this time. I'm just representing myself. Having listened to this presentation, I'm not sure if you guys want to become landlords. It's not an easy thing. And I don't know if the town would like the municipality to be landlords. So that's just a comment to start off with. I'm a little concerned in the vision that this town is heading. It seems that we're turning into a renter's town, not a community anymore. We seem to be losing a lot of community aspects over the last recent years. We've lost a lot of things. The most recent thing, the theater itself in town here. I'm concerned that we're losing our community. It seems that we're getting a lot of renters and we're not getting a larger tax base through having more affordable homes in the form of, I'm in one of the co-ops, so I think that's a good way to go. There must be other ways to go, but by us doing that, or this council doing that, it seems that we're turning into a company town, where basically people come here for a few years, work, make their money, move on. We're not keeping and sustaining our community. So I think that's important that maybe the visions change, or to include that a little bit more. I can tell you from personal information that there are lots of people in town that would like to own a house in this town, and they don't have the ability to do that. So I think it's in the community's interest if we go and head more towards that field. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Very concise, well within the 5 minutes that I had given you, and I will open it to questions that I think I might say that we as council decided we do not want to become landlords, and that is why we are looking at a municipally controlled corporation managed by council overall and on behalf of the community, but slightly different.
Yeah, technically it looks that way, but when you talk to people, they're gonna come to you. Right?
Fair enough. Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson.
I appreciate all your comments and I agree with many of them. But I just guess my question would be, besides the co-op, which we've been able to, in our community, multiple times, I think 3 now. What are some examples of other ways to add affordable housing units to the community that aren't rental units?
I believe that I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think there's probably grants through the government. I know the government is trying to provide affordable governments at both the federal and probably the provincial too, that might be a way to keep the costs down. I just got off work here. I did take time off work to come here. A lot of people can't afford the housing prices in Jasper because of the fact that we are a very closed market, and again, it's location. So I think if there are ways to do that to provide more housing in town, I think that's a good thing. Again, it's going to increase the tax base. It's going to allow more things, more community things to happen. When I first came here, there used to be dances all the time in the fall and in the winter. Different organizations put them on. What's happened is a lot of those people have aged. They're not doing those volunteer work. The new people aren't coming about because they're not staying here. They're only here for their short period of time. They can't find a place to live, can't find a place to buy because families want a place to live, to buy, not to rent. So they're moving on. And I've seen that a lot happen in the last recent years. So we need whatever means it is to get affordable housing. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a construction person. I don't know, but I'm sure there are ways through the government plans to get something to get more housing in Jasper that we need other than just apartments.
Thank you for that, Councillor DeMora.
Well, to Councillor Wilson's question there, and you know what, I really support some of what Mr. Gamlin's saying as well. And I believe Canmore was one of the leaders in our area that went into some equity building opportunities where the municipality or some derivative of it owns the lease for units, but provides potential local homeowners in the future to have like a 5-year opportunity to build equity so that when they're checking out of their units, they get the money that they put in back and plus CPI, and the municipality gets the opportunity to sell to somebody else so that once those people that have put that money into their own place have an opportunity to put a down payment on something bigger. And that's an opportunity. I don't know to what extent that's been discussed with this project, but maybe for the future when we're looking at other operations or opportunities, that might be something to consider. I don't know how far along they are at this point to talk to colliers about that. Thank you.
Could I make another comment? I don't know how much you spent on this Jasper Housing Corporation, but I will tell you from our experience, to build the condos that we built, or the condominium, or the co-ops we built, it's really cost the town nothing to do that. We've done it on our own. So in reality, that's a good thing for the community because they're not putting expenditures out. So I'm not sure the other co-op projects, but I know that it's really cost the town nothing for us to build it for ourselves.
Thank you for those additional comments. If there are no other questions from councillors, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attendance. Nice to have people in the corner room. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a presentation to this public hearing? Well, another auctioneer going once. Second call for presenters. Okay. This is not where I want to be.
I think the next one's on there, Aaron.
Okay, my name's Art Peter. I'm pretty much retired. I've worked in construction all my life. I don't know if you guys know, you must know this. When work is done for a municipality or any government entity, the price goes up 30 to 40%. And I'm trying to figure out how. Mr. Dieter, could I just ask you to speak a little closer to the mic side? I'm trying to figure out how a private entity can't afford this, but the community can. I cannot wrap my head around those figures at all. So I would like to ask just a couple. So I found out about this on Friday. It was in the paper on Thursday. The deadline to say something was Friday. I've talked to 15 to 20 people in those 2 days. Nobody knew this was going on. And it seems to me, if you're going to put it in the paper today, have your deadline tomorrow and have the meeting 2 days later, you don't really want the participation of the community to see what they want. Because once you do this, and it sounds to me like you guys are going to do this, right? You can't go backwards. It'll be a snowball that is rolling down a very large hill. So I would just like to ask a couple of simple questions, because as a private individual, if I had my credit card maxed out, my approach wouldn't be to find a different way to get around that. And it seems like this corporation is about getting around the debt ceiling. So simple question in round figures, how much is the muni right now in debt? Any ideas? Because I don't know. Is John still, maybe he could tell us?
Yeah, I'm still on, but I actually don't have the numbers. I'm the lawyer. I did the.
Actually, I was referring to Mr. Gibbons, who should know those numbers, but sorry about that. Thanks for taking that opportunity to pitch in, Mr. McDonald. But I think that the reference was either to Mr. Greathead or Mr. Gibbon, and certainly those numbers are available. I don't have them at my fingertips, but so no guesses. Mr. Gibbon, are you able to address that question? What is our debt level now, and what is our debt ceiling? I know that those numbers have both been before council relatively recently, but I'm not prepared to try and remember exactly what they were.
Your worship, that's correct. They have been in front of council recently, and council will remember that there's a bit of a challenge in the way that our auditors reflected the municipality's revenue in 2022. And I don't want to make that same mistake in repeating that number with that inconsistency again. But I will very briefly have in front of me our 2022 audited financial statements, which are on the municipality's website. Those audited financial statements show the municipality's total debt capacity calculated two different ways. We are within provincially mandated limits. The municipality, and I'll actually go for the 2021 numbers. And the reason that I do that is because the 2022 year, our debt limit was artificially increased as a result of our accountants reflecting 20 years of revenue the auditors reflecting revenue that we will receive over the next 20 years, all in the 2022 year. That's how they do it. So the 2021 number is more reflective of our debt capacity. Our total debt limit is $26 million. And at the year end of 2021, we had $12 million of total debt. At the year end of 2022, we had $11 million of total debt. So you can see that we had been paying down our debt, and we were approximately under half of our provincially mandated debt limit. The municipality is paying down debt over time, well, that would suggest that the municipality has significant debt capacity. We're not maxing out our credit cards or pushing up against that ceiling at this time. Administration is aware, and council is aware, that we have other capital demands, including improvements to our water, wastewater systems, and the activity center. Those items will push us towards our provincially mandated debt limit. And that's the intent of identifying a model that allows the municipality to take on housing debt that wouldn't reflect against that debt limitation. This is a common practice in other municipalities where they have established municipally controlled corporations for these special purposes. Water utilities, in fact, our earlier presenter, Aquatera, is a municipally controlled corporation. And it means that the shareholder municipalities of Grand Prairie, the County of Grand Prairie, Sexsmith and Wembley, they don't have any debt on their books related to water infrastructure because that municipally controlled corporation, Aquatera, carries it. And that is what is being proposed here in front of council today.
And what's the debt limit on the new corporation? It will not be, as I understand it, subject to debt limits in the way municipalities are. So it's a corporation that can borrow money on the strength of its ability to secure the borrowing, like any other company. Right. So does the properties that you own now, does that pay into that debt ceiling that we have right now? I.e., are your properties right now, they're profitable? Again, those numbers were before us, I would say, if at all, marginally. That is the capital expense of maintaining those properties against the rents that we charge. The net income is low, depressingly low. Mr. Gibbon, you can, again, you may have access to those numbers.
Your worship, I'm happy to answer that. So the current properties the municipality owns and uses for staff accommodation are not revenue generating. And Jake referenced that in his presentation on the business plan. The municipality has historically been subsidizing those properties. Administratively, we have a focus on reducing that subsidy, but that is reflected in the business plan. That subsidy is there because the MOJ has been doing that. The corporation will have the opportunity to reflect the actual operating costs in a transparent manner, and council can make a choice about to what extent it wishes to subsidize staff accommodation for municipal employees. The thing that the proposed corporate structure will allow the municipality to do that cannot be taken advantage of today is the corporation could, and I'm saying that very specifically, could choose to leverage those properties and borrow against them, which is something as municipal governments we don't do. So we have essentially two housing properties and one commercial property. They're all, in essence, mortgage free, and any private individual or corporation would see an opportunity to leverage that to borrow against that equity and invest in new housing. That's an opportunity that would be available to the proposed corporation, but is not available to the municipality.
Thank you for that. So I'm learning as I'm going along here and in listening to the presentation. Correct me if I'm wrong. You have $5 million in muni board at what, 4.75%. You've got a grant for $6.5 million. and you're gonna sell the rest of the units to make up for what it costs to build this building, correct? So did I hear that they're looking at $6 or $7 million from private identity? Is that a number I've also got correct? I thought it was higher than that. Mr. Given is shaking his head in an affirmative manner.
Your worship, the presenter has that correct. It's approximately $6 or $7 million. The detail is in the document, and we don't have the specificity because we still need to go to the market for construction. We've been doing some due diligence in that, working with pre-qualified contractors. But the resident has that number correct as what was reflected in the presentation, approximately $6 or $7 million that we would need to raise in order to move forward with construction of the project.
And in raising that, is there leftover that is picked up by the muni? Because 5 million plus 6.5 million plus, let's take the high 7 million. That gives you 18.5 million. I was hearing a number of around 22 to 23 million, hoping that the costs aren't going to go up in a year down the road. And after what we just went through with the arena or the activity center, I don't know how well that 15% is going to work for us. But right now, am I wrong, or is the price of this more than the 18.5? Mr. Dean?
Yes,
Mr.
I
Dean,
can. Thank you. So just to be clear, there's a contribution from Parks Canada that is in negotiations or talks right now. So that is also part of that. 23.6 million is the total capital cost. The $5 million debenture is from the municipality of Jasper that will be transferred to the JMHC. So it won't be on the municipality's books. It's a $6.5 million grant from the AHPP. And the remaining, I believe it's closer to 9.8 will come from the private sector, which is how we calculated those share prices of roughly $300,000 and $350,000. Now, these are all loose numbers because Parks Canada, we haven't confirmed any contribution from the $2.085 million land valuation. However, that's our estimate at this time.
Thank you. So, like I say, I only got the sheet a couple days ago, and in reading it, I forgot how many to be determined there are. And I'm not sure you guys have the information in front of you to make this vote happen with all those lines that says to be determined. Those are all important lines, right, on going forward. I agree with everything John said, and maybe we should be looking at another co-op. But I was born and raised here, and this problem has always been here. And it's going to always be here. I tried to find in the last few days the studies that have been done both on the sewer that we did in the last year and the housing study. And I couldn't find them on the Muni website. But going by memory, it outlined how many units were short now, and I think it was 658. And then they predicted 20 years or 25 years down the road of what the population here was going to be. And I can't find that number, but it was like 10,600. And we're going, how is that possible? If we put a fourplex on every property in Jasper, we could still not get to 10,600. There's just not room. Asking for parks for more land is just my opinion, not the way to go. You're going to get into the situation again and perpetuate this, right? We're a heritage site, and we have to come to grips with that. And we have a summer staff issue that we have to come to grips with. And summer staff is a different definition than what council is using as in a 5-year stint in town. Summer staff is May to October, right? To house all those people, you're gonna have a building that's partly empty in the winter. To solve it, it's just gonna be perpetual. So I'm all for trying to do more co-ops. I am a landlord myself, getting out of it as the days go on, but a private identity without construction skills could not have done what I've done. The amount of work that it takes, unpaid or subsidized. But you guys are already subsidizing 3 properties, and I wonder how much can Jasper subsidize more? And I think everybody wants a nice, cheap place to live. But the community cannot create something where a person from CN can live in there and get $120,000 or $100,000 a year and live at being charged 60% of the rent. If you're at all going to go down this road, it's got to be something like non-park law, where to live in there, you cannot earn more than X amount of dollars. Because if you don't do that, all you're doing is taking the tax base in Jasper and having them subsidize somebody else's livelihood so that they can save a lot of money themselves. We did that by 16 hours a day. Now people want to do it with 8 hours a day. It's not going to work. I think one last thing I really want to emphasize, you have muni money, which is our tax dollar. You have a grant, which is great, and then you have private money that you want to bring in. You're asking for 350,000 with no equity in play. So you're asking a business to fork over that money a year in advance so you can build this. They haven't even seen it yet, just for the right of them to put one of their staff in there. They are far better off buying a house to have that equity that's going to grow. Nobody I talked to in the last 3 days would even entertain the idea of borrowing money so that they can give it to the community, so that they can have a subscription for an apartment. I would like to ask if the community is going to jump in both feet and go, well, we can deal with this part later. How much more money is the community willing to borrow to build this if you can't pre-sell them all? Right? Can we have some assurance that if you don't sell 40% of them, you can't move forward? Because that just means that we're going to borrow more money. And the interest that you're going to pay, for every dollar you pay in interest, it's something that you can't do with that dollar. And we are, in the last year and a half, we doubled our debt. We're going down that road even farther. And when we hit land use and development, like I said, I was in business all my life. I've dealing with 2 governments. I've also dealt with the municipality having to hand over everything to Parks Canada. So you're going to have land use and development. You're going to meet the people at the front door. Everything that you take, you're going to have to turn around and hand to Parks. And they're going to say, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't. Still 2 levels of government. Only the tax base will be paying for it, not the federal government, which is our taxes too. But I'm sorry, went on too long, but it takes a lot for anybody to come here if they're not comfortable doing this. And I'm not comfortable with what's going on in the town that I grew up in. Some things are not going to change, other things we have to adapt. But I think you can take a message from how many people are in this room right now
Because if I was a corporation or a business who needed accommodations, I would be here to find out the facts. But they're not. A, because they don't know about it, and B, because they think it's a fantasy that we can afford to become landlords. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dieter. Are there any other individuals wishing to present? I went twice earlier. We can go to the third call. And no one responds to that. So thank you for that. Based on the public presentations, do councillors have any additional questions for administration? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. Just a question of clarification, and I'm a bit concerned about a comment that Mr. Dietrich had made that we had only advertised on Thursday and the deadline closed on Friday for submissions. I'd just like to ask administration, I think that we did advertise a longer period of time, and what platforms did we advertise this on?
Your worship, to Councillor Wilson's question, the municipality advertised for 2 consecutive weeks in the local newspaper. And in addition to that, the municipality also had the information available on our website. All of the documentation that was here in front of council today was available to the public for more than a month. And the time where the municipality, where council, the last committee meeting, directed administration to set up this public hearing, I believe that that was also reported on in the local media as well. So we did use local media. Local media reported on this process, and the municipality met all the requirements set out by the provincial government, which included advertising in local physical media 2 consecutive weeks. We also publicized the fact that this would be happening through our social media channels. So we did take both approaches of sort of the new media, using social media to point people to where they could find information, and we used traditional media following government regulations and doing that for 2 consecutive weeks.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, and the second question to admin as well is regarding I guess the release price of the land. This structure is allowing us to get the land for substantially less than a private developer would be able to acquire the land for. Am I right?
Councillor Wilson, your worship is correct. Parks Canada does have a process, and I should say not just Parks Canada, it's actually a federal agency that is a partner of Parks Canada. Parks Canada will put forward a proposal that will be evaluated by another federal agency who will determine the release value of the land. The release value of the land will be reflective of any limitations that are imposed on it. And this lack of private ownership of individual units is one of those limitations. So that's a long way of saying, yes, the land will be released at less than market value and at less than any private developer would be able to secure the land. And the reason that it will be released at less than market value is because of these constraints that are being imposed on the way that that land can be used. Parks Canada locally or nationally is not actually in charge of that process. And that proposal needs to go forward through the federal bureaucracy before we can have a finalized number. And that's why the business plan in front of you reflects that at its what we believe would be the highest possible value that we would have to pay for the land. We suspect that the actual release value, when all of the limitations and requirements for affordability are reflected, will be far less than what is reflected in the business plan.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Deputy Mayor Pellegrini.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Given. I'd like to ask, we're talking about that businesses are going to buy in for 6 to 7 million. Do we have a list of individual businesses that are interested in buying in with some equity? And they're aware that they will not actually have equity in the building itself?
Your worship, to Deputy Mayor Keller MP's question. First, I just want to address the equity issue. It is incorrect to say that there is no opportunity to build equity or to have an equity interest. A key part of the proposal is that anyone who purchases in fact has an equity in that, and there is a built in the business plan, a rate of appreciation that is built into that. So if somebody comes and buys a $350,000 share, that share will appreciate in value over time and could be sold at some point in the future for a defined value, where that person would get their initial purchase price out of that share, plus essentially an inflationary increase, which I believe we've limited to 2%. So that is built into the plan. And so anybody that purchases a share will be able to get their money out. It is not purchasing in order to get a subscription. It is purchasing to have that financial equity, that share. With respect to your other question, Jake can maybe speak to the market sounding that was a part of the development of the business plan. Our Colliers team met with a number of businesses to share the outlines of this proposal and to gauge whether it was something that they would be interested in. Jake can maybe speak to that in a bit more detail. There were also a number of businesses prior to 2020 who invested, I would say, nominal amounts in order to be notified of the share, the previous co-investment concept. So we have that list of people who are previously interested in co-investment. We also have the list of people that Jake met with during the market sounding. And Jake, I'll turn it over to you to speak to that because I understand I may be getting a little bit choppy on my Zoom.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, on page 72 of the package, there's the list of local businesses that we consulted throughout the process and a high-level overview of kind of the discussion points. There was interest from several businesses, not all, but from several businesses that are listed in the model proposed today. We did attempt to speak with more than the list of businesses that are there, but unfortunately weren't able to reach some of them. However, yes, it was of interest, and we spoke to 9 businesses in total with a couple of their employees and or owners of the businesses throughout the process.
Go ahead, Councillor Keller.
Thank you for that. Just follow up, but they will not be able to use the share as a guarantee for a mortgage. Am I correct?
They may not be able to. It depends on the relationship with their financial institution. We believe that they might have trouble securing a mortgage through the share, which is why there's other avenues, whether that be cash, whether they leverage their existing assets to date. There may be some financial incentives depending on the risk profile that the board would like to adopt. The board of the JMHC, to be clear, would like to adopt relating to smaller businesses that have to overcome that barrier of purchasing a share. The share appreciation is limited to 2% annually. That is the limit, not to say it couldn't be less than that, but given what we've seen in the market in the last 30 years, I think we can say with pretty fair certainty that it will escalate, and the reason for the 2% ceiling is to maintain affordability throughout time, so in perpetuity. And that will be the same as the rental rates that are set by the board. Those will be reviewed annually or biannually. That's one of the decisions the board will have to make once established. But they will also have to maintain affordability, not only because of AHPP, but as Bill mentioned, as well as Parks Canada.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Councillor DeBoer.
I have a few questions and I can pause between them if there are other councillors so that people don't get tired of each person talking. I know I can be long-winded at times, but I appreciate the opportunity. So through your worship, maybe to Mr. Dean and Colliers, what we're talking about here is basically a co-op for businesses. I think that's kind of the reference that was made. I am part of a condo group itself that operates in a similar fashion, bought into a certain amount of time. By the time we go to sell, it's gone up with just with CPI. Through you, your worship, do you think there might be an opportunity for private ownership to operate in a similar manner with this current project, where people in the community, as I referenced before, could build up their own private equity, so we don't have to go to, it doesn't have to all be business? If we consider that, and if I missed that in the plan, I apologize.
Yeah, so it can be any private entity or just a resident. The reason we mention businesses is because that's who we perform the market sounding with. However, it could be any resident of Jasper who meets the residency requirements, as well as some, the board will set criteria for the residents as well to meet the affordability requirements set. However, yes, it could be a business, it could be just a resident of Jasper. The focus was on the businesses for the business plan purposes. However, yes, it could be.
And another question, just revolving around that, for clarity for the public, at what stage are we at where we're able to start fielding requests coming in? Is there an ongoing list that we have? We have a small group here that was interviewed. Have we been building another list, or are there other inquiries coming in, both from the private sector or residential sector?
So when we spoke to the private sector businesses, we informed them that we would be circling back at a later date. Now that later date, it was fluctuating a little bit because we needed to go through council, through the public hearing process, and also wanted to provide more concrete numbers once we get an updated capital cost estimate from the private sector for construction. So following this public hearing, should we move forward with the Connaught development, then there would be a recirculation or redistribution to the private sector in the form of a memo or a phone call in terms of what those actual financials look like, what the model was finalized to be, and so on and so forth. So that would be circulated. Now, in terms of a list, Bill mentioned a list of businesses that had provided, a nominal fee. I think it was a few $100s per unit from the co-investment model from the 2018 and 2020 rapid housing initiative applications. Those businesses were contacted as part of this exercise as well.
I have another one for Mr. Gibbon, but unless anybody else has any questions. Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Mr. Gibbon, we've experienced a lot of cost overruns or projections. I go back to the fitness center expansion, the building that we're sitting in right now, and most recently with the activity center arena project. There was a comment made that, often when it comes to municipalities, that the costs end up being a lot higher. We went through this process recently when we kind of had some cost estimates based on requests that we put out there, and then when we actually engaged, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just how I remember the process. When we actually engaged with the contractor, we realized that there was a higher cost to going on with the development than we initially projected. What kind of assurances do we have with this project coming forward to us that it's different than what we just experienced with the activity center project?
Your worship, for Councillor Demota. The approach administration has taken is really to build off of a pre-qualification exercise that was undertaken to support the Rapid Housing Initiative. So there are 3 pre-qualified contractors who went through a public process. Administration has kept in touch with them through the federal grant applications, and has within the last month been in contact with all three of them to re-qualify their cost estimates. And so we have received indicative costing as recently as the last 30 days that suggests that the budget that is in front of council is what we would expect to see in the marketplace. Should council wish to move forward, as Jake said, the next step would be to actually go back to those three pre-qualified bidders with essentially a statement of requirements describing what we want built. And then they would have approximately 2 months to do a design to meet those requirements and come back to us with proposals and firm pricing. The goal would be to enter into a contract for construction with one of those entities by the end of the year, and that contract would be for a fixed price. So administration has done their due diligence by getting updates to pricing within the last 30 days, and would ensure that we would have an expedited process that would allow us to engage a builder by the end of this year in a fixed price contract that would mitigate any risks of other increases.
If I may, just one step further, and it's my attitude of healthy skepticism again, and I apologize if I'm making you repeat a few things, but it's for the benefit of the hearing and maybe, you know, an expanded audience for people tuning in today. I appreciate the information that you've given us, and going forward with that, when we went through the past exercise, there was a little bit of a shock and awe to the contractor when it came to addressing housing needs while the project was going on, and that extra expenditure added to the increase. And I'm just wondering if that overall awareness from the proponents involved is on the table.
Your Worship, for Councillor Demota, yeah, there is an opportunity for us to improve contractor awareness so that the bids that we receive back are better and more in line with sort of what we would expect in the market. That would be an example of something that we would include in our statement of requirements. Essentially, the terms of reference that we put out for bidders would include that they need to identify their allowances for living out allowances, or, you know, sort of accommodation while the project is underway. And we would point to the fact that they, you know, about what we see as current market rates. So we can do a better job of ensuring that potential bidders, of which there are 3 that are pre-qualified, that they all have a very solid understanding of the cost of accommodation for their teams that would be undertaking the project. Additionally, the municipality is allowing for at least 2 different alternative building methods, either traditional construction or stick built, where people bring out 2x4s and they assemble the 2x4s into a building, or modular construction, which would be constructed off-site and delivered. We would issue a request for proposals that would allow for either of those 2 options to provide contractors a wide variety of options to sort of address our needs, some of which could include having the majority of their labor force off-site and not have to face those accommodation costs.
Appreciate that, and very clear answers. And again, I'm finished with my questioning right now, but I do want to extend a thank you for the members of the public that participated and got us to ask those pertinent questions. And I think without them, I wouldn't have gone as deep today. So thank you for coming.
Councillor Melvin.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I too would like to thank our presenters. And during the period of time of the presentations, we had 2 other housing models brought up, one being the concept of co-op housing and the other one being MPL Place. And I'm going to ask Mr. Gibbon to clarify MPL Place did receive government funding, and there was a 20-year agreement. That agreement will end in about 5 or 6 years, at which point the rental controls at MPL Place will no longer be in force, and that building will go to market rent, which is different from what this proposal is, in that in perpetuity, there will be that affordability built in, as well as when you resell your asset, that it's only going to go up by the rate of inflation or what number is determined. And I think that's a big distinction when we're looking at a project that was very successful, that was done 13, 14 years ago, and how we now are proposing to move forward. And if you could ensure, Mr. Gibbon, that I haven't got anything wrong there.
Your worship, to Councillor Melnick's point about MPL Place, no, you have the outlines of that essentially correct. One, I think important note is that the timeline is actually slightly shorter than you referenced. I believe it's 2028 that the affordability requirement expires at MPL Place, and then after that period, the private owner will have the ability to do whatever they wish with the property. The model that's in front of council now, the municipally controlled corporation, or essentially a crown corporation, if we could call it that, means that its profit motivation is significantly different than a private ownership model, and will allow the council of the municipality into the future to determine what the rates should be, and they can do that with the public interest at mind. Additionally, in our grant application to the Government of Alberta, we have committed to a minimum of 40 years of affordability as defined by the province, and you saw those rates in the business plan. So there are a couple of different levels of commitment to affordability. First, defining it as 40 years rather than 20 that MPL Place was built under, and the fact that as the owner of the JMHC, future municipal councils will be in charge of determining what the operational model looks like and what rents would be affordable for Jasperites of the future, of generations down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions that have arisen in the minds of other councillors? Mr. Gibbon, if I may, the second of the public presenters either asked a question or made reference to the possibility of a threshold for moving forward, and I won't entirely get it accurate or paraphrased somewhat, I suppose, but moving forward in that event, is there a subscription quotient that would be required? At what point would the municipality or the MCC be able to say there is sufficient private sector support that this either can move forward or cannot? And you take that moment.
He gets the best freeze today. It gets really favorable freezes.
All right. Were you able to hear the
Your
question?
worship, I did hear that. And maybe I'll just turn off my video so that I can answer verbally, and you don't have to look at how my face looks right now. Can you still hear me, your worship?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my understanding is that the question is really about attaining a level of pre-sales before determining whether the project would go forward or not. And that is one of those examples of items that are just one step down the road. That is something that would be determined by the board of directors of the corporation, should council choose to establish the corporation. Other items that the board of directors will need to consider would be whether they might wish to offer any financing options to people who wish to purchase shares. And that's referenced in the business plan. And so this is not a new idea. It is referenced, and Jake can maybe reference the actual page number. But because these equities will be challenging to mortgage, not necessarily impossible, but be challenging to borrow against, the corporation may choose to offer some terms of payment. And that could take a variety of different forms: 50% down, 50% upon occupancy, pay over 5 years, some kind of thing. So those types of decisions and the go, no go decision on construction, or more accurately, the alternatives to securing 100% of the financing upfront, would be decisions that would be within the purview of the board of directors of the corporation, should council choose to establish it. Jake, did you want to comment on my my reference point about the financing options?
Yeah, so starting on page 55 of the package, or page 19 of the business plan, table 7 outlines the various options for financing from private investment, and then a description basically of the different financing methods and some high-level challenges or benefits of each option.
And Your Worship, while folks are maybe scrolling to that page, I don't want to suggest that that if council makes this decision of forming the municipal corporation, that everything is great and away we go to construction. Council is being asked today to consider whether this structure of a private corporation is the best opportunity to meet some of those constraints that we saw. Access to capital being a major one, and the ability to move at a faster pace, and to be able to offer an equity position, which is what we heard from the business community through both the consultation this time around, but also through the concept of the of the program that we put forward with the RHI application. We heard that it was challenging for businesses to put up capital and get nothing in return. And so the model that's in front of you satisfies that, because it actually allows somebody to put up the capital, and for that capital to be something that shows on their balance sheet. It is an asset. The shares in the municipal corporation will be assets that they can show, and should they ever want to divest themselves of those assets, they are able to be sold. And this was not possible under previous models, and is something that is incorporated within the MCC model.
Thank you, Mr. Given. I don't see a number of hands up at the moment for further questions. I might end my questioning with one, and I would give each of you an opportunity. So Mr. McDonald, Mr. Deans, and Mr. Given, if you wish, but don't feel compelled to respond at all. But you all heard the presentations from members of the public, and they touched on a variety of issues. Having heard those comments and questions from members of the public, is there anything arising from that to which you would like to respond? And if so, you're welcome, and if not, that's fine as well.
Your Worship, maybe I'll do that. Just on two specific points. Certainly, as administration, we don't want to debate the merits, but I do want to correct the record on two specific points, which I think have been asked, but I just want to reinforce. First, the municipality followed all requirements for public advertising, and in fact went above and beyond the requirements for public advertising. This public hearing was advertised 2 consecutive weeks in local media, in print media, and in advance of that, for probably more than 4 weeks, the municipality had all of the documentation available to the public, and we had used various channels to ensure that the public was aware of that. So the suggestion that this was only advertised once, the day before the deadline, is factually incorrect. And we appreciate that not everybody sees every paper, but there is laws that we have to follow. We follow those and then some. And then there was also the suggestion that that ownership was not possible, that this was built only for renters. And in fact, as I think you've heard through the presentations today, ownership is an explicit part of this proposal. The difference is that nobody owns a specific apartment, they own a share. But the financial effect of that is that somebody who puts money in to gain access to a unit can get that money out in the future. And in fact, they will get out more than they put in because those shares will appreciate over time. And so that is ownership. The model is set up for individuals as well as companies to be able to purchase those shares. And administration believes that this satisfies all of the requirements that council set out with respect to being able to leverage private financial contributions, to be able to deliver that equity that I just referenced, and ultimately to deliver on increasing the number of housing units available in the community. Again, the intent today is to strike this municipally controlled corporation with the explicit purpose of building a new 40-unit apartment building, and that model is something that we can replicate into the future to deliver additional units. I think that those are the only things that I wanted to reference with respect to some inaccuracies that didn't reflect what has actually happened.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Subject to any further questions, I would invite any councillor to make a motion to close this public hearing, but recognizing that if such a motion is made and carried, we will go directly into the motions and debate, and the opportunity for questioning will be completed. So if you have further questions, now is the time, but otherwise I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Councillor Demote.
I was going to motion to close, and I believe Councillor Hall as well, or she has a question? Because I have a comment before.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. My question is, we're looking at this parcel of land to build a 40-unit apartment building. What other parcels of land are left within our boundary that we could be building co-op housing or single family dwellings?
Your worship, for Councillor Hall's question, first, the parcel that we're talking about, and just for easy reference, the one directly adjacent to Petro-Canada on Connaught Drive, that parcel, at least conceptually, had been envisioned for a total of 80 units of development across 2 buildings. So there's the potential that a second project could happen on that same site to add an additional 40 units. So this, again, conceptually, this is the first of 2 potential builds on that site. And then the options start to become more limited. As council is aware, the municipality is working with the RCMP and Parks Canada to try to unlock land that is essentially adjacent to the Forest Park Inn on the north side of town, or on the east side of town, to create a new lot that would be serviced and ready for development there. There are other sites that have been identified. Once the RCMP station moves, that would open up a new site at the location of the existing RCMP site, RCMP detachment. There are what are commonly known as the church properties that I believe that there is a private group that is working with the church to identify where there's development opportunity there. And then one of the more challenging sites is the ones that back on that are in the vicinity of Bear Hill Lodge. Those are fairly constrained because access and servicing is very difficult. But those sites, along with parcel GB that has been cleared along Connaught Drive, are really the extent of sites that are available within the municipality at this time.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demoto.
Further questions? Okay, I just want to say, you know, I think there might be an opportunity to get a campaign out there to some younger people that want to like, you know, stay here for a little bit longer. Whether there's one person out there, a family or a couple, you know, you might have an opportunity here to invest in some equity in the community to help you build towards something bigger. And it's not as daunting as it seems from the outside until you actually go and do it. An opportunity comes along every between 10 and 20 years where we get little projects that come up in the community. And some of us have benefited from it, but all of us at the table know it takes a little bit of scraping to get, you know, to your first step. And if there is an opportunity here for some people that live here, this isn't just for businesses that I've heard today and in the past. So I encourage, you know, to start saving and get ready for the next opportunity. The opportunities in size and, you know, what you're getting is diminishing. You know, not all of them are going to have garages anymore. And we've already seen that with the Caribou Creek one, which is one of the more recent projects. So the further down the line that, you know, you're able to, the longer you take probably the smaller the units you're going to get. So I encourage people to really look at this, and if you know people that might be interested, tell them. Like, I think this is a good thing to get out in the community and have a little bit more conversation on. So having said that, I would like to move that we close the public hearing for today.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Demoto. Is there any debate on the motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. I declare that the public hearing is closed. We will move momentarily the motions arising, but there was considerable information. I thank our presenters on screen and those presenters in person in the room. There is much to consider for councillors, so I am going to invite us to take a recess, and when we come back, we can begin with a motion or motions arising from the public hearing and then into debate on those motions. So it appears to be about 12 minutes after 4. So I will give us an 8-minute break and we will come back at 4:20. All right, thank you. We were all a little late returning from recess, but we are all now gathered and back in session. The public hearing has been closed, and I would invite motions arising from the public hearing the corresponding way with the debate. Councillor Wilson.
I would make a motion that council confirm it is satisfied that the MCC will carry on business solely for one or more of the purposes as enumerated in section 3 of the Municipal Government Act. B, that the MCC will provide a service or benefit to residents of the municipality. And C, that the profits and dividends of the MCC will provide a direct benefit to the residents of the municipality.
Do you want to continue? An omnibus motion, as it were? Councillor Demoto?
If Councillor Wilson is going to do a full one, I have a little bit of a change to number 4 in the wording, but if you were happy to take that on as a friendly amendment, and you want to do an omnibus motion, I wasn't pleased with the way 4 was worded. It seemed a little Tombstone, Arizona to me.
Let's just go
one by one.
One by one. So that's my motion.
All right.
All right. Is there any debate on the motion before us? There's not. I will call the question. All those in favor? Are none opposed? That is carried. Are there further motions? Councillor Wilson.
I would make the motion that council approve the MCC as proposed, be incorporated and controlled by the municipality.
Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Councillor Wilson.
I'll make the motion that council approve upon the incorporation of the MCC, the municipality enter into a unanimous shareholder agreement with the MCC, consistent with what was described in the public forum today, to the council agenda dated August 15th. And as well, what was attached to the council agenda dated August 15th, 2023, as required by the MGA and the MCC regulation.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota.
I would like to remove as attached, because we did talk about some discussion around that, and I would appreciate your opinion on that, because from what our legal advisor had expressed, that there could be some adaptations, so it wouldn't be as attached to today's agenda.
Thank you for that. Based on that previous discussion, I think the word consistent with the version attached reflects that it will not be an exact replica of the version attached, consistent in general terms, but adapted based on today's discussion, particularly to incorporate the need for the MCC to be able to deal with other properties other than like the existing properties and not just the Connaught project. So, and that's what I heard the motion to be, consistent with the version attached. So I'm content with that.
I appreciate that clarity. I thought I heard as in there as well, so it's good if that's true.
Any further debates or any debates on that motion then? Right, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That was carried. Is there a further motion? Councillor Demota.
I have one, fourth one, not as recommended, but just a little different. The council authorized the chief administrative officer to establish the required corporation in accordance with the aforementioned resolutions. Changes to do all things necessary.
And to incorporate or to create the corporation consistent with the foregoing, is that what you said?
The council authorized the CAO to establish the required corporation in accordance with the aforementioned resolutions.
Thank you for that. Mr. Gibbon, are you still with us?
Yes, Your Worship.
And does that slight change of wording impact you at all? I think it would authorize you to do those things legally and procedurally necessary in order to create the corporation. But do you have any different view?
Your Worship, no, I don't. I'm comfortable with the motion as proposed by Councillor Demota. The administration will have the guidance and approval and the authority to go move forward.
Thank you. Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried. Well, thank you all. I believe that the requirements of the public hearing included, as I announced for the city. And I do, and therefore announce that all those motions were in the affirmative, and thus administration is directed to proceed to incorporate the MCC, subject to some slight changes to the unanimous shareholders agreement as discussed. Again, from my perspective, I thank those individuals who appeared on our screens. Thank you for all of your work and the efforts in your presentation today. I thank the members of the public who attended and presented or attended and listened. I, for myself, will simply say that from my perspective, we have established only a vehicle to try and get us to an end where every council to which I have ever been honored to partake has had housing as a critical aim of council, and this gives us one more vehicle to achieve that end. So I appreciate the work of all. Thank you for that. We turn now to agenda item 6.2. Our mission statement. A new policy before us as having been recommended to us by committee of the whole here for approval. Perhaps before any councillor makes a motion, I will make one comment. On a further reading, responsibilities of council, I have no issue with the policy, no issue with the purpose. Review the mission statement policy within 90 days of a general election and review and approve any revisions. I might suggest that we could say review the mission statement policy at minimum within 90 days of a general election, so that it would always be open for council to review it, but it would be required to review it within 90 days of a general election. I mean, not that we probably couldn't, but why not if we're having a new policy say that? Council can review it when it chooses, but it must review it within 90 days of an election. Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarity, would that additional verbiage also apply in the CAO section of responsibilities?
I think not. Council can direct itself, but the responsibility of the CAO is to ensure that that minimum requirement of review within 90 days of an election is carried out. And so I did consider that, but I think it is appropriately worded in my view. Councillor Demoda.
I was just thinking where that actually puts councils from your experience and maybe from some of the councillors that have just recently been elected. Do you think that gives enough time for a new council? I think that puts you at mid-January. You have the holiday schedule to go through and all that, and you're just barely getting on your feet, come the beginning of December, and with all the stuff that's going on in between. I'm just wondering if it should be 100 days, like an extra. I know it's silly to bring it up.
I think it only means the start of the process. It doesn't mean the conclusion.
It sounds good.
Historically, it's been once every 12 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Hall.
I'll make the motion if there isn't any further debate or any further questions, that council approve policy A-102 mission statement as amended.
And that amendment just being additional 2 words to council responsibilities. Right. Everybody understands the motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And that takes us to agenda item 6.3, the respect and dignity policy. Again, that is here with a recommendation of committee of the whole. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm ready to move that one, and I appreciate the addition and definition of dignity. I think it's concise and it doesn't have to be too wordy, and explains it with in a lot of detail without a lot of words.
I have one question for administration. Mr. Gibbon, I regret that he's gone.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. I regret that I didn't make note of this when this was before committee of the whole, but what covers the interaction between staff members in terms of respect and dignity? So this is an outward facing policy, a public facing policy that says there's a requirement to engage respectfully with our staff, either in their physical or their virtual workspace. But it is possible that staff members can be disrespectful to each other. And this doesn't seem to capture that. But I'm wondering if that is captured in other ways that we need not concern ourselves with in this policy, or whether we should look at broadening the language. And I think in particular of the current case in Chestermere where an acting director, I think, was charged with criminal assault on an employee. And that goes far beyond workplace respect and dignity. But if we choose to protect our employees, should they be equally protected from other employees?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have several policies in place to ensure that the employees have a respectful workplace and how they're to conduct themselves with each other. I know that there's a 6-page document when I started with the municipality that's posted conspicuously throughout the work sites with our anti-violence and harassment policy, and it deals with bullying, site-specific behaviors that are non-tolerant. And I can tell you that specifically I've dealt with many staff and in disciplinary issues for violating that policy, for not treating their coworkers with due respect or in a bullying or threatening manner. So it's something that is taken seriously within the organization.
All right, well, I thank you for that, and I'm happy to know that you have that tool at your disposal. I regret that you ever have to use it, but it's good that it's there, and if it is there, then we don't need to further adapt this particular policy. It is public facing, and that is an important consideration, but you have the tools to deal with internal interactions between staff members, and that's sufficient for my purposes. So thank you for that. Does any councillor wish to make a motion? Councillor DeMoy?
I move that council approve policy B105, respect and dignity, as presented.
Thank you for that. Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And then we go to agenda item 6.4, procurement policy. Again, a matter coming before us for the recommendation from council sitting as committee of the whole. Any comments before I call for a motion? just to confirm then how picky you and I can be, I'm going to suggest one change to 4.2B. So it currently says emailing notification of procurement opportunities issued through Alberta Purchasing Connection to all members of council and the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce. I would like to add a comma after council and the word to after and. So it would be to all members of council, comma, and to the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce. Because we want that and to be disjunctive, not conjunctive, and we don't want notice only to members who are members of council and the Jasper Park.
That's good.
Well, Councillor Wilson?
I will make that motion with your amended words that council approve B120 procurement policy as amended.
Councillor Demota?
I just wanted to say that, you know, I know that I got caught on the word flawed, and my intention was to address that maybe the process was lacking or just insufficient for what was needed in the community and for us to operate. So in my mind at the time, I felt it was faulty. So I'm glad that at least we're addressing this, and then for opportunities in the future, we have an improved process. So thank you for everyone taking a moment to that discussion.
Thank you. We have a motion before us from Councillor Wilson. If there is no further debate, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Which takes us to agenda item 7, notices of motion, of which we have none. Councillor reports. Deputy Mayor Kelleher-Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I just want to report on my board meeting with Evergreens last week. We met through Zoom, and I'm going to be working with the Jasper Senior Society. We're going to try and raise $160,000 for the generator in Alpine Summit. It came to the forefront during the fires in Edson, when we had a number of residents from Edson in at our seniors home, and there was the talk of the power going out, and our residents became very worried. So many of the families have contacted me, and I talked with the board. And so the Jasper Senior Society, I talked with the president, Dennis Marks, and she's going to help me lead this forward. So we will be doing some fundraisers throughout the next year, and we're hoping to have it installed by next summer. So I may come up with a request to put some money in the budget 2024 for us to also make a donation towards generator.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor DeMonic.
I appreciate hearing about that progress, and because there's been a lot of discussion in the last year. Now, would that generator be supplying power to both locations or just for Alpine Summit?
For now, it would be just to Alpine Summit. There is a small generator at Alpine Summit that we're talking about moving to the manor.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further councillor reports? All right, agenda item 9, upcoming events. We have a list. Are there any additional events? It seems to me that on the last list of upcoming events, there was the AGM for Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce. August 31st, I'm thinking. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. The Jasper Folk Music Festival is September 8th and 9th as well.
Additionally, if somebody can help me, I thought that we had at least tentatively booked a blanket exercise through Lisa Waddell. And then I saw something that said it was deleted, but rescheduled, but I've seen nothing about a reschedule. Does anybody know when that event is going to take place? Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. It was unfortunately canceled. We actually got an email during this meeting today. It will be rescheduled for further days. So nothing's set yet.
Okay. Thank you. And just for information, I have a breakfast meeting tomorrow with the Minister of Sport and Tourism for the province, Minister Cho, and the CEO of Travel Alberta, who is also the Deputy Minister of Sport and Tourism. I believe that Mr. Jackson from Tourism Jasper will also be there, and at some point, I think 10 o'clock, we have a tour guide sitting here nodding. Mr. Greathead, with some assistance from Carlson, is going to give us a tour of the ongoing project at the arena. And of course, we had funding there that was open. Perhaps neglected to mention our MLA, what we had that breakfast meeting, and he helped us get some funding from the province for that project. So the minister gets to take a look at how that provincial money is being spent to benefit our community. And lastly, I was waiting for Councillor Melnick to raise it, but he has invited us all for beer at noon on Saturday the 19th at the Brew Pub to celebrate the 100th birthday of 6015, which is across the street. So if there's nothing else going on Saturday at noon, that's where to be.
And I did mention that the beverage of preference would be the stout named after the engine 6360. However, you do not need to be tied to that.
Councillor DeMore.
Also at the Legion on Saturday, there's a Manitoba style social as a fundraiser for people in the Ukraine. So I think that's on the 19th. So some local members that are ex-Manitobans are putting that on. I think it's a fun thing to participate in. People haven't experienced that before, so I'd like to encourage people to go to that as well.
Thank you for that. If there are no other upcoming events to bring to the notice of council, I think there is no further business. I would welcome a motion to adjourn. Councillor Keller-Granby, look on the draw. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We are adjourned at 10 minutes before 5 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. Thank you all. And if anybody's left out in Zoom world, thank you. And again, thanks to those residents who showed up for the public hearing incorporated into today's regular meeting. That is it. Thank you all.